All right, what is up, guys? Welcome in GC Live. I'm Wes. He is Chris. As always, presented by our guy Clint Hammond, CMG Home Loans, ClintHammond.com, 803-422-6797, NMLS number 71597. We're going to talk a little spring football for the most part today. But as always, we tell you about Clint. If you're in the market to buy a new home, just hit Clint up. Obviously, that's probably not most of you right now, but if you are in that market, give Clint a chance to earn your business. He'll do a great job with your mortgage, just like he did for me multiple times. So, Chris, it's been, I would say, I don't want to say a slow start, but it has been a situation where we got to see one practice. Then there was kind of, some players spoke, but there's only been two practices. And I looked at spring ball, kind of looking at the schedule. I think we're really going to start rolling this week in terms of coordinators speaking today. You were there for that press conference. Then some practices, multiple practices this week, maybe a few more viewing opportunities coming up, other coaches speaking. So I think maybe we're going to start to get some real information coming up this week, next week. And I'm excited to see how this thing starts to take shape. But we did get to hit on or hear on some storylines that we've probably all broken down and talked about at this point. But here, the coordinators today and kind of their take on it. And some of it, I would say, was probably about what we expected. However, you always sort of do have those little things you can try to glean. Why did he say it this way? Why did he say it that way? And again, I know you were there in person, so I'll let you lead it off, man. Was there any one specific thing that just caught your attention more than all else from either Mike Shula or Clayton White today?
Yeah, there was one thing that kind of seemed small from Mike Shula, and there were probably a few items, but my main takeaway was he was asked a question about Tree Babalade. And for those paying attention, if you're a member of GamecockCentral.com, you should have already read Wes's report that Tree is going to be – he's got some versatility, right? So he's drawing a look at multiple positions. And Shula was asked about that today, and it wasn't his answer on Wes, the positional versatility, because he kind of said he left it a little, yeah, maybe that could be, a little coy on that part. It was actually the other part of his answer that was more interesting to me. And paraphrasing here, Shula said, I don't want to classify it or word it as the light has come on, but the light has come on, right? That's kind of what he said about Tree Babalade. Y'all are going to have to bear with me. The pollen is annihilating me. Wes, talk for just a second while I get some water. Sorry.
Yeah, so Tree Babalade, the light potentially coming on there, so to speak. And, I think this is kind of, Chris, what you want, and I'll let you bring yourself back in when you're ready, man. I think this is what you want when you are recruiting high school guards and tackles. And, I think a situation where if, you have these highly regarded recruiting classes on the offensive line. And yes, some of the guys come right in and just play right away, like Josiah Thompson, but that's really not the norm. And even for a guy as talented as him, that's not exactly what you want to have to put him through. You'd really rather a guy at least be able to have 1 year to get acclimated at that position. So I think what we all wondered, yeah, they still went out. They got the 3 portal guys. As we've reported, they feel good about all 3, frankly. But was this the year that the 2 guys we always kind of lump together, was this the Tree and Tro year? Like, was this when Tree and Tro were going to start to, frankly, just live up to that potential? And again, it's not that normal to just ask a true freshman offensive lineman to have to step in and play great in the SEC. So I think for you to complete your thought here, man, it sounded like Shula was like readily admitting, like, hey, we are seeing big steps here from Tree. And I know he's asked specifically about Tree, but I've heard very reliably some of the same things that he was saying, but in regards to Tro Ball, just kind of looking like the guy that they wanted him to be when he was recruited.
Well, and Shula was asked later as a follow-up, is there anybody else that's in that tree category of, again, he didn't say, like he said, the light has come on, but didn't want to exactly classify it that way. And he said, look, yeah, there are others, but if I named one, I'd have to name them all, probably. And so they feel pretty good about the progression. And we'll get to this later. Clayton White, actually, Wes, had a similar feel for some of the guys that are going into year 2 at South Carolina that were freshmen last year. And we can talk about that. But I just found his answer about Tree fascinating. Because if you look at Tree, this was a big-time recruit, 4-star, who committed out of the DMV area, decommitted. You got him back in the fold. When he's played, Wes, he has played well, and often not in great circumstances. It's like, hey, Tree, here you go play left tackle against Georgia in your first year. Things like that where it's not an ideal scenario. Hasn't always been 100% healthy at times. Tree, by his own admission, I remember talking to him for a Garnet Trust interview at one point, and there was a big focus on getting healthy, but also, getting his body right, So Shula could have just glossed over that and said, yeah, Tree's working hard, everybody's working hard, and kind of given some coach speak. And Shula went beyond that with Tree, is the sense I got, especially sitting in the room. He seems to really feel like there's been a leap made. And when you couple that, Wes, with what you've heard behind the scenes, that gives you some encouragement, right? At the end of the day, you want the guys to win the jobs that are the best possible guys. There was almost a negative connotation at times given last year to, why did South Carolina bring in transfer offensive linemen? Why can't they just develop the young guys? Well, doesn't mean that Tro Ball wasn't developing last year. It just meant Kamar Bell and TS3 are experienced players, seniors, and good ball players themselves that won out a competitive job. At the end of the day, it's about competition and who wins. And it could be that this year Tree becomes kind of a full-time starter, or not kind of, he becomes a full-time starter, and Tro Ball, one of the two of the two, maybe none of the two, but it does look like they like the competition there. And I think this could end up being the year for both of those guys in their Carolina careers.
Well, and I know, dude, to me, anytime you look at a spot and you start to feel, well, I think this is maybe a fan thing. This is definitely not a coach thing of, we got too many guys for that spot. Like, you can never have too many guys, honestly. Like, it just finds a way to work out, especially at that position. So whether Tree is a starter exiting spring or if he is starter quality, he will ultimately find his way onto the field. That's just how it typically works because guys get banged up, guys get hurt. It's football. Things happen. Ideally, you exit camp feeling good about Tree, feeling good about Tro, and then feeling good about all 3 interior transfer guys as well. And no matter who's starting, who's a backup, so to speak, you just know, hey, these guys will be ready when they're called upon. The coaches, I've noticed the coordinators do not like to bring up individuals. Like, you're not going to get much, like, they're now, if you ask them specifically about a guy, you might get a little bit more. And that was the case here with Tree. Coordinators especially do not like to single out, like, hey, this wide receiver has caught every ball that's been thrown in camp. You have to ask very specific questions. And even then you might not get one, an exact specific answer. But he did, when asked about center, no surprise, but specifically, and again, if you're reading on Gamecock Central, you anticipated this too. I did notice Boaz and RJ both got, pretty quick off top mentions just in terms of that position and who's competing. And, I think you can we don't know how that position is going to shake out overall, like the O-line as a whole, but you can already kind of put together the pieces on what it may look like. It's just going to be about who wins particular battles. Because, dude, Nick Sharp has played a lot of ball at Wake Forest. So when you start looking at one of those guard spots, he's going to be in the mix, So I think ultimately there's potentially a good problem to have, so to speak, there on the interior. Let let's stay with Shula. Just let's talk offense while we're talking offense, and then we'll flip over to the other side. Um, he was asked about the wide receivers, the freshmen, again, specifically the freshman wide receivers, but no specifics in terms of guys within that group. And I mean, he did at least, Chris, give you some of the check boxes in terms of overall. He said, they can run, they're quick, and they can catch. Which, if you're talking about your freshman receivers, that's a pretty good starting place. Like you want to check all those boxes, and obviously, we're still in the learning stages of who's going to be kind of the cream of the crop in this group. But did anything catch your eye at all about what he said about the receivers? I don't think he named a name at all in that group. I think it was just
No,
very generalized there.
it was. And, to your point earlier, when Shula started talking about position battles, we were getting into territory of name the entire room. With running backs, he named all the guys coming back and adding in Rasul. And, he went through, I asked him a question actually about tight ends, same thing. And so with receivers, I mean, gosh, there's so many new ones from this class that you might be worried about missing one, So, a 6-man class, 5 of them on campus this spring. He did mention Donovan Murphy will join this summer, of course. He did mention JB, Jared Brown, and Nick by name just as returners, right, that are going to factor in, but does seem to like the freshmen. And, I think the important thing to keep in mind with those comments, Wes, I mean, we're 2 days in, right? They've had 2 practices. They're not even in full pads. And for me, kind of combining what Shula said with an opinion of mine, these next several practices, I think, are going to be very important because this isn't a bad thing per se, but there's going to be some guys that hit a wall at some point because they're freshmen. This is the first time they've done this at this level. Shula talked a lot about, where am I going against a certain look on a given play call? How am I beating press coverage? Like the starting point of what they have is what you want. They can catch, they can run, they're athletic. You love those things. But learning how to play, blocking, like all those things are going to have to progress. It is a progression. I think he mentioned that several times. It's a day-to-day thing. So, as they get the pads on and things become more and more physical and they're going up against, Jalen Kilgore and Judge Collier and DQ Smith in practice, some of these linebackers that are men that have been in the program longer, these young receivers, I think, are going to continue to learn. Some of it's going to be trial by fire, baptism by fire type of stuff. That's not necessarily a bad thing. They're going to need to go through, I think, some of those trials and tribulations throughout spring ball, and I think they're going to be better for it. But always good to know that he backed up really what we've heard from players, from Beamer, what we've heard behind the scenes. This group of freshman receivers, they feel like have the athletic ability, that's required to succeed at the position.
Yeah, for sure, man. And I was looking through your transcript, which, by the way, on Gamecock Central as well, you don't have to have a subscription to read it. If you're one of the people that don't really like videos, you just like to read through. Trying to do that right now. Did anybody ask him about kind of the backups at quarterback? I don't think we got much. Big Red was asking here too, rough idea of depth chart arrangement. Not that they were going to give us a depth chart by any means at this point, other than to maybe, like Beamer did the other day, confirm the breaking news that Lenora Sellers is your starting quarterback. Wow. I actually, dude, I saw, those like AI articles that pop up on Facebook and all this stuff now. And I don't think this was an AI, so I'm really not making fun of anyone, but this was like some website that doesn't cover South Carolina, like it was some just national clickbait article, and it was I'm trying to think of the headline. It wasn't the word massive. It was God, what's another word for massive? Anyway, the point was that the headline was like, massive news for South Carolina's quarterback room. And I clicked it because I was just like,
They got you.
I was like, well, I knew it was crap, but I was like,
Yeah,
I've
you're
got to
just like,
see what this is.
yeah.
And it was seriously Lenore Sellers is the starting quarterback, and I'm just like, or no, it was. I think it was as a helicopter lands on my roof. Apparently, it was actually more about the fact that Beamer was saying he wanted competition in the room, like trying to allude to like there was competition for Lenoris's position, like the starting job or something. It was insane. So anyway, yes, Lenoris is your starter, obviously, but he didn't talk any about the backups, which I've continued to hear little things about Cutter Woods, which I
Yeah.
think is a fascinating part of this entire discussion. That will be a remaining storyline throughout the spring and probably into the preseason is exactly what does all that look like.
It is. I think we all had some ideas probably going into the spring of, hey, Lenoris is your starter. Massive news. Lenoris is your starter. And I think you probably kind of got the feel, hey, they brought in Aaron Olin as a transfer, right? From Ohio State, big time quarterback. He's probably the backup, right? And that may indeed end up being the case, but like he's not super experienced, right? He's still a very young player. He's going into a new system at a new school. And then you continually hear things about Cutter Woods that make you go, okay, maybe this is a little more interesting in terms of the backup job. You have Dante Reno in there too. He didn't address it, Wes, which was on one hand, for some reason, and since I was in the room, I can put a personal fail down in my column too. Wasn't asked about him specifically, but also there were times where he kind of, I don't mean this in a negative sense, but he veered off to talk about other positions or other people or other storylines, even in the course of another question, and never really got to quarterbacks. Now that could be, through 2 practices. It's pretty early, It's not like we would get up there at the end of spring practice and Mike Shula is not going to be asked about quarterbacks or not going to address quarterbacks outright. He obviously is. He was asked multiple questions about Lenoris specifically, but not really the rest of the guys in that room. So that'll come over time. I think, again, I'll go back to what I said about the receivers. Even as the pads come on, things get more and more physical. Things get ramped up more. You're installing more. These young guys like Air and Cutter Woods and Dante Reno are having more and more thrown at them from Shula. I think you'll start to see, some level of clarity there. I was going to say separation. I don't know if we'll get that or not in the backup race. Eventually we will, but maybe not even as early as this spring.
Yeah, eventually we'll have to, right? Like there
Yep.
won't be a choice, but yeah, we'll see, man. I thought it was a little bit fascinating. So my ears perked up just a little bit, Chris, when he started talking about, he being Shula, started talking about running the football as a quarterback. Because I know, and I'm not saying right or wrong, I know a lot of people have put quite a bit of stock in something Shula said in his intro press conference, sort of about the decision making of when to run, like when to have your quarterback run versus when you want your quarterback hanging in there, not taking so many hits. And, Shula basically, and Chris, I'll let you speak to it, but his way of saying it was that you want your quarterback. First of all, he said you don't want your quarterback carrying the ball 25 times like he's a running back. And he said you want your quarterback running the football when he wants to run the football, as opposed to running the football because he has to. And at first, I processed that in my brain as designed runs versus not designed runs. And I was like, I don't know if I like the sound of that. Then as he kept talking and as I processed it more, I said, I don't think that's what he meant. I think it was more, you don't want your quarterback being like the picture is muddy to me. Like, I don't, coaches will talk about the picture being muddy or the picture being blurry, which is a quarterback is seeing things, but he's not really knowing what he's seeing. All he's seeing is guys just running everywhere. He doesn't know where the defense is. He doesn't know what his next read is. Let me take off running. I think what it kind of meant was more like, oh, I see 10 yards of green grass. I don't have an easy throw here. Let me take my 10 yards. And I think that's a fine line, dude. And because Shula has said, hey, we want him throwing the football. We want him looking to throw the football first. This thing is going to be hyper criticized throughout the next season. But I also think we have to remember, I keep bringing it up, Josh Allen. It is constantly discussed. Is he running too much? I should run more. With all the guys that run the football well, it's a constant conversation about, oh, they're running the guy way too much, or oh, why isn't he running more? That's his biggest weapon.
Yeah.
My ear was like finely tuned to what Shula was going to say about that, just because I know, as Jeff points out in the comments here, he didn't run as much against Illinois in the bowl game. So everyone was already very finely tuned into that storyline.
Yeah, especially after Shula had talked about that leading into the bowl game. You're wondering, all right, is this a coaching point? Don't run. And to answer that question, I don't believe it was a coaching point then or now. Don't run, right? I think there were a lot of different things in that bowl game that played in. But talking about going forward, I think the best crystallization of it is another phrase that Shula used, and that is, when Lenoris runs the ball, we want him to do so on our terms. Meaning, there are a couple different things. Think about some of Lenoris's special runs last season. They came when it looked like, I had 5 of them pop in my head in 1 second. They came when he was dead to rights, like a normal human being is sacked. Even most special quarterbacks are sacked for a big loss. And then you can think about, well, why did that happen? Well, maybe somebody got beat one-on-one. Maybe the defense brought more than you could block. Maybe Lenoris didn't see a read fast enough. Maybe it was all of the above, actually, which is possible in a complex game like football. There's 22 people on the field at one given time. A lot of stuff happening. Now, it's great that he can escape those and make those type of plays. That gives you an advantage. You would rather not have that happen to start with, right? So that's part of it. So the part that Shula is speaking to is, I don't want Lenoris dropping back and taking off and kind of defaulting to taking off running, even though he's, as he said, pretty good at running. You don't want him to drop back, not have a great sense or great handle on what's going on, what he's seeing defensively, what they're supposed to be doing on offense, and then take off. Even though when he takes off, something special may happen. You want to be able to run the entire offense. And I would argue, Wes, what we saw in the bowl game actually illustrates that point. Because to their credit, Illinois, I think, did a lot defensively that said, pass the ball. We're going to make you pass it, And yeah, could we have the debate of should still run it a little bit more? Yes. But when you can have that type of balance, you become very, very difficult to stop. Because then you have Lenoris Sellers saying, to your point, Wes, your example, we might have a good read here on, but here's 10 yards. Let me go get it, because I'll probably get more than 10. Design runs. Being able to escape a sack, that's great. But in his second year as a starter, being more and more comfortable with the offense and being able to unlock that part of your game. That doesn't mean they're telling Lenoris, don't run, don't take off. It's just trying to have a little more balance to it, because even as special as he is, Wes, even as much as he has pulled that Superman act, it doesn't work every time. You can't bank on, hey, it's 3rd and 16, Lenoris will run for a touchdown. You can't bank on it's 3rd and 7, and here's 3 first-round picks for Texas A&M, and Lenoris is going to make them all miss and go run for a first down or find Rocket Sanders in the flat because he's not here anymore. There's a lot there. So I think it's just about balancing that out and taking the next step.
Yeah, for sure, man. And I think another big storyline we're going to see there is just this conversation. I did think it was a little bit, I don't think it was on purpose, but it was fascinating hearing Shula say the words, we don't want him to run 25 times like a running back, when you do have a certain small segment of people trying to say that Sellers is a glorified running back, which is the most laughable thing you could ever say about a guy who, by the way, I posted this. I don't think I even, and I've, we've been as high on Lenoris as about anybody. I don't think I even realized statistically until, you remember, Beamer brought it up to you and me in our sit down, just how high up in some of the SEC categories that Lenoris was this season. And then you go look for a guy who, again, according to a small segment of people, is, quote, not a passer. And then you see that 65.6% completion percentage this past year, was 3rd in the SEC behind only Quinn at Texas and Jackson Dart at Ole Miss. So 2 SEC veterans, 2 veterans at this point. I guess for Quinn years it wasn't all of the SEC, but you get the point. 2 veteran quarterbacks. And was also, let's see, I just had it, 7th in school history for a season at South Carolina and 28th in the country. So, and you're talking about a guy like, yes, there were some short throws in there, but a guy who was at times throwing the football well down the field, and a guy who, frankly, we talked about it all year, did not have a completely dynamic receiving core on the other end either. So, I hope that Sellers is able to, while also coming along as a quarterback and, processing things at just faster, like you see, the older a quarterback gets, the more experience you get, you're going to see things you didn't see as a younger player. That's just how it works. But I hope he doesn't get into the mindset of feeling like he has to prove anybody wrong on that stuff, because a lot of that talk is just Twitter talk, man. Like, it's silly. It's people who watch clips on Twitter or watch one game to give their opinion on a guy, and it really doesn't hold any weight. I also think, real quickly, we're going to move on. I think some of what Illinois did on defense was a result of the fact that they had an entire month to just build their defense around stopping Lenoris. When you're facing a team on a week-to-week basis, you can't completely change up your entire defense. Like, they were forcing South Carolina to throw the ball, but also they had like one of their DBs as like a off-the-ball secondary spy who his only job was to like play middle of the field, but then spy Lenoris as well. I mean, you can't just change your entire defense on a week-to-week basis based on your opponent. Going into a bowl game, if you want to do that, you absolutely can. And so, credit Illinois for that change. But I don't think it's a thing where every opponent Carolina plays, will they take some elements from that? Probably was Ole Miss. Ole Miss had a great game plan. We're going to drop back and, force South Carolina to play everything underneath. But Ole Miss also had NFL guys up front rushing the passer, so they didn't have to blitz you. Not everybody's going to be able to just throw those game plans out there, I think. So, in theory, you can take some things away from what teams did in the bowl game, but I just don't think it's something to completely worry about. Like, I think the more we hear about this offense, I actually feel more and more positive about what Carolina could be on the offensive side of the ball if they stay healthy.
Yeah, and I do think, part of being able to counteract to, when an opponent does have elite personnel defensively, which will happen obviously when you play South Carolina's schedule or when they have a good game plan, that's actually part of counteracting that, is being able to have this offense and have Sellers take that next step, because there is still a progression, right? It's okay to say Lenore Sellers is not a finished product as a passer. Everybody knows that. That should actually be exciting. But if you've ever uttered the phrase Lenore Sellers is a glorified running back, you are really telling on yourself with how little you know about football, because, he had a pretty similar season in terms of passing yardage to what Cade Klubnik had in 2023. Cade had 100 yards literally passing against Carolina in a win in 2023. Nobody was saying he's not a quarterback. It's just because a guy is an elite runner as a quarterback doesn't mean he's just a running back. It means he's an elite runner at quarterback, right? And so, there's actually an argument to be made that Lenoris could get better as a runner, not from a physical standpoint, just a know when to take off, when to not standpoint, and having that in your back pocket. I think there's a good bit more work that he can do as a passer, but that's to add on to a body of work that's actually already, pretty good for him.
Yeah, already very impressive, man. You want to do a couple of ad reads here, Chris?
Yeah, let's tell the people about some of our folks. How about we tell them about this one? Palmetto Golf and Belts. Our guy Brandon Cone, big Gamecock Central subscriber, longtime Gamecock Central subscriber, big South Carolina fan. And so golf season is pretty much here. I don't know if it coincides with the pollen that's had me choked up today, but there's at least a correlation. If you're a golfer, check out PalmettoGolfing.com. That's Brandon's store, Palmetto Golf and Belts. Go right there. Outstanding needlepoint belts, some of them in South Carolina colors, custom golf tees, custom golf gloves, custom golf towels. If you're not a golfer, that's fine. Go check out one of the needlepoint belts. He's got the South Carolina colors. He's got the palmetto tree. He's got the cross. Outstanding products. Have some of them here right in the office. And Brandon's a great guy. Someone you want to do business with, right? Because he's a South Carolina supporter. He's a Gamecock Central supporter. You can support his business, but also get some great stuff. Prices are outstanding for really great products. So if you like needlepoint belts, if you're a golfer, want some new gear, go check it out at PalmettoGolfing.com. A lot of Gamecock Central subscribers, Wes, have already ordered, and they've been very happy with their orders, with their customer service, and with their products. So go join them today, PalmettoGolfing.com.
And dude, let me say, getting that URL was a great get. I'm actually surprised Palmetto Golfing.
That's right.
Was not locked down. So that's a great get there.
He must have had a good consultant on that one, Wes.
Yeah, must have. All right, let's tell everybody about our friend Andy and My Perfect Franchise as well. Then we'll get to some defense. Y'all know Andy by now. We've told you about him for quite a while. Phone number 404-973-9901. But if this is not familiar to you, you may be saying, what is My Perfect Franchise? Well, My Perfect Franchise and MyPerfectFranchise.net is giving you the opportunity of business ownership, whether that is like a side biz or whether you want to go all in and sort of just be your own boss. What Andy does is he connects people like you who are looking to get into business ownership with franchises who are looking for highly driven people who are just kind of dead set on living their own life and pushing their own buttons themselves. And so if you call Andy today, 404-973-9901, not only is he going to help match you up with a franchise, but he's going to help you every single step of the way to get started in business ownership. And one of the best parts about it, other than the freedom of owning your own business, is that this part is absolutely free to you. So Andy's going to help you get through the entire process, no charge to you, because franchises will pay a franchise finder fee for great people to work with. So Andy will be helping you out, no charge at all. Again, hit him up, 404-973-9901. All right, Chris, let's talk some defense here. Clayton White speaking. And I would say maybe my favorite quote from Clayton we got today was in passing, but that they're just going to have to get back to playing regular football with a regular human at safety now, because Nicky Mamori is not there to play 800 snaps and just be a freak, basically.
Yeah, that was where I was going to go, man. I mean, because you're right. He can talk about, when you're calling a defense, hey, if we call this, that's going to single up our safety with a first round pick slot receiver. All right, I feel good, and look, you might say, well, I remember that one game, I remember the Florida game that year. Nick got beat on a touchdown. You're DB in the SEC, you're going to get beat. Nick made tons and tons of plays for this team. And look at the year he had last year. Look how many plays he cleaned up, Wes. It's not a normal thing to have a guy that big who can run that fast, who could be in on so many tackles, who could cover guys one-on-one, who could drop back in zone. He's a unicorn, right? So the question you ask isn't, hey, who can replace Nick Eamon-Warry? Because you really can't. That also doesn't mean you have to restructure your entire defense. There's going to be times Clayton White makes a call, and whoever's in there at safety this year is going to have to cover somebody man-to-man. But it is something you have to think about. It's a luxury to have them, just like it's a luxury when it's third down and you're thinking about what to call. And you can say, I've got Kyle Kennard, Dylan Stewart, Tonka, and TJ Sanders on the field. You don't have that anymore either. So it's about finding the right guys, man. And, it's going to be very interesting to see who ends up taking that other safety position opposite DQ Smith. He kind of reiterated again. They want to keep Jalen Kilgore at home at nickel because he had a really good year there. Maybe Jalen Kilgore becomes a little bit more of that, obviously going to be a different role than Nick because it's a different position. But does his importance become more where you're kind of building your thoughts in the secondary around him? That might be.
Yeah, and I don't want to read in too much, Chris, but I kind of do. He was asked about Nickelback, right? And that's where Jalen was. And I know this is something I've been just curious about all off season. We know Beamer told us, hey, right now Kilgore is playing Nickelback, right? And Clayton said, we're starting him out at Nickelback. Didn't say, hey, he's only going to play Nickelback, and didn't say he is the Nickelback. So how did he say it? We're starting him out at home, I think,
Yep.
which meant Nickelback. He also said Cisse is getting some time at nickel. So I think, Clayton White used the word luxury talking about Nick E. Had the luxury of having Nick E for 3 years. I think it's a luxury to have that option to move Kilgore back to safety potentially if things if you don't get what you want out of one of those other guys beside DQ. Because ultimately, how has this team always operated? It's been what gets your best five on the field. So if Kilgore playing nickel gets your best five on the field, then he'll play nickel. But if Kilgore playing safety gets your best five on the field, then I think we see him ultimately, even though right now, 100% everybody says he's nickel. If that's what gets your best five, then I think they'll have to make that move.
Yeah, I mean, it was in one way. I don't want to say he shut down Jalen moving. I mean, he confirmed he's at nickel. They want to keep him at home, but he did say start out. Like, he used some different terminology there. Wes, one thing I've got in the back of my mind too is that obviously South Carolina's without Vakari Swain this spring. If all goes well, the expectation is he's back with this team in time for preseason practice and that he's on the field in time for 2025. And Vakari Swain is a corner, and he's a corner that's played a good bit of ball, 16 games through 2 years. So you start thinking about that best five. And you start thinking about the fact that Brandon Cisse could play corner, Brandon Cisse could play nickel. You start thinking about how, man, all things being equal, are the best two guys Judge Collier and Vakari Swain at corner? Maybe so. Is the best move to put Jalen Kilgore at safety because he's maybe the closest thing you've got to Nick? and somebody else can man the nickel position. What does Jalewis Solomon have to say about the corner spot? What does Miles Norwood have to say? Like, you could start asking some questions that don't exactly have answers. And so while you'd like to keep Jalen there because that's where he's thrived, where he just put together his best season, just moving him somewhere eventually make the most sense. And it could. And to be clear, that's not what Clayton White said. He didn't go that far, but it does seem like that door, is a little bit cracked. And I think they'll take this spring to get more data, to learn more about what they have at each spot, where everybody fits in best. That's kind of the point of spring ball. They're not going to play, luckily, next week. They're not going to play next month. They've got some time to sort all this out.
Yeah, for sure, man. And I think Jalewis Solomon, that's one of your wild cards to this whole thing too. Like if he starts to come along and they're saying, wow, we got to get this guy on the field, then that completely changes the calculus at that position. With Cisse and with Norwood to an extent, Clayton White, like I said, didn't really name names this time, but when we had him on 107.5 last week, he did name some names, and he kind of perked up a little bit when he was talking about what Brandon Cisse had done so far. But this was before spring ball even started. But winter workouts said, hey, Norwood's had a good start to his South Carolina career. So they're going to have some options there, man. I think that'll be another one of our conversations that continues. And then today he was asked kind of about some of those second-year guys, specifically I think it was Alex asking him. He asked about Solomon, Busey, and who do you remember? Oh, Kelvin Hunter. And he was talking about, hey, when you're in the season, you're just kind of in your grind of surviving week to week, right? And getting, you're trying to get ready for an opponent every single week. And but you get back in the spring, and those freshmen, those young guys, all of a sudden they're in the right spot, right? Like you realize, hey, they were learning along the way. And I think sometimes that development for individuals has to get put on the side a little bit, because your job during the season, go win games. But Clayton's point, and he did not talk about individuals, but he was talking about that trio right there, was you look up and you're like, hey, they have made progress. So maybe something positive to note, to keep an eye on. Do we see a step out of Solomon, Hunter, or Busey, and what does that mean for that conversation as well?
Yeah, and he kind of put it in those similar terms to Mike Shula and talking about the light coming on for guys, and he not obviously the secondary, but he talked about the transition of going from a guy who was married with 2 kids at linebacker to a guy, who just got his driver's license a couple years ago, and how that's different and actually keeps you younger as a coach in some ways. But, you've got guys that went through season 1 and played some type of role, whether that was, playing some on special teams, playing a bit part, being an important practice player. So now they're in year 2 and they come back and they're more comfortable, right? They're more comfortable in their own skin. They're more comfortable as a college athlete. They know the defense better. They've had more practice time. They've had another offseason to get bigger and stronger and faster and all those things in the weight room. And so it just feels a little bit different. You kind of feel like they're ready to take another step forward. So just 3 guys you mentioned, Wes, they're all very different players, but they all have, I think, a unique skill set that could factor in. And that might be, for some guys, it might mostly be on special teams. For some guys, it might be, pushing for serious playing time. I think we kind of forget Jalewis Solomon was a big time recruiting get for this program, beat out some huge schools for him, a ball player, and Hunter and Busey, they may not have drawn the recruiting accolades, but Busey showed some good things last year on special teams. Hunter's a guy that, I think the staff has liked some of his traits as well. So this will be an important spring for them to come along, because their progress will help answer some of those questions about how Torian Gray and Clayton White feel about that group of secondary players.
Yeah, no doubt. And again, if you missed it, go check out the transcript for both of them on Gamecock Central. You can watch the videos as well. If y'all seen me, Chris, should I introduce everybody to Thatcher before we get out of here?
100%.
If I've been looking down or if you've heard a puppy whining, this is the newest
man,
addition of the Mitchell household. I think he's camera shy right now.
He is.
He's a Shih Tzu, so
he's awesome.
Handful right here, let me tell you. But this is his first GC Live experience. I don't know if he's enjoying it or not, but he doesn't like being left alone yet. So I let him let him join us here for the show. He's been being pretty good though, I think. So y'all can all welcome Thatcher in the chat if you see fit. And Chris, finally, man, I feel like we've done this 3 times, but I feel like we need to do a 4th. Let's tell the people about Zion Giles, and let's do it some justice. I'm gonna work on getting his huddle up, and we'll pop some film on here because we were on location. Shout out to our friends at Still Hands in the Vista. But as some of you knew, we were having audio issues, and I think we talked about Zion about literally 3 times, but it was back and forth, and I want to pull this as a separate clip too to post on our YouTube. So I want it to be a little more formal, and I want for it to be good. And I think his film and his ability is deserving of that, because the more, and I talked to Charles Power, for those who are on Gamecock Central, you may have seen the article. Charles, the best in the business, I think, in terms of evaluating guys. And Charles, obviously, if you look at the ranking, he's number 40 in the country as Zion, which Charles is the leader of doing those rankings. So he's high on him. But had some of the same thoughts we did, Chris, just about the film. He called him a vicious blocker, which is something you always want to hear about a guy. And I just think, Chris, Zion checks a ton of the boxes you're looking for if you're trying to recruit elite offensive line prospects.
Yeah, about 6'5", 290 pounds, and just off the bus type of guy, checks that box. But then you look at the other things. Is he just big? Because some guys, Wes, at the high school level, that's their number one quality. That's their redeeming quality. You just look and say he's bigger than everybody. Well, he's also a great athlete. Like, he's an easy mover. You watch him on film, he's playing right tackle. We saw him at South Carolina's camp last month. I came away thinking this guy's probably athletic enough to play left tackle in the SEC, just watching his size athleticism combo. So he's big, he can move. Great. What else? Well, I think positional versatility. If you told me he's going to play guard at South Carolina, I'd believe it. Tackle. If you said, hey, they're going to roll a ball over to him and tell him to play center, I could believe that, because he's also got a really high football IQ. And this is a great kid, man. I was at his commitment ceremony. Everybody from his coach, his principal, to former coaches, to teammates, classmates, just think so highly of this kid. He's really well thought of in the community. So, man, when you look at it, he just checks all the boxes. And I'd add in there too, like, plays very physical. So if you're trying to find something as kind of a knock against him, or a box that he doesn't check, you really are searching pretty far and wide, honestly.
Yeah, I texted you this morning because I thought it was kind of humorous, but a new Charles Power evaluation term has just dropped, and that is play personality. And in the case of our guy Zion, play personality just means what personality stands out while they're playing the game of football. And you'll see it right now, this poor number 10 just getting mashed out there. But plays the game, like Chris said, with physicality, with violence, with dominance. And, that's just not what you always see with these high school offensive linemen. We've seen high school offensive linemen, frankly, that have Power 4 offers, that have SEC, that have everything, and you watch how they play the actual game, and you're going, man, there's going to have to be a lot of progress, frankly. But if a kid is 6'6", 270, and can move, then they're going to get recruited, right? Because coaches love that potential, and there's only so many guys walking the high school hallways that have those traits. The beauty of Zion, I think he has your physical traits, but he also already, he has a dad who's, a coach in his own right and has kind of pushed the buttons, I think, there and pushed him as a player and a person. And just, you look at the fact that seems to be such a great kid too, from a great family. You don't worry about is he going to come in and work? Is he going to come in and do what is asked of him? There are very few just purifier offensive line prospects, in my opinion. Like that is a very difficult position to evaluate, I think. But the thing with Zion is I think there is a great deal of upside here. But when you look at the play personality, like he's talking about, the fact that he's already big enough, the fact that he has sort of those intangibles off the field, that means there's probably a pretty high floor here as well. Like I think as long as the kid comes in and stays healthy and all those things, probably a fairly strong chance he's going to help your program in some way, with the only question being just where does that upside kind of ultimately land, I think.
Yeah, I think it's about, like, offensive line is one of the hardest to project, and you can be surprised about guys that you see where on film they look great. You see them in a camp setting, even against great competition, they may look great and they don't pan out. And I think when that happens, you try to go back and say, what maybe did you miss? Like, what was it? But from a starting point with Giles, again, I don't see red flags. I tend with offensive linemen to really lean on, is he going to be athletic enough, particularly if he's thought of as a tackle? Can he move? And I really think he can. Sometimes, Wes, you get guys who can really move, but maybe they're not tough enough. I think he's tough. You watch him on film. You listen to his coach talk about him. You listen to his dad talk about him. His dad was described, I think his dad even mentioned this before the commitment, like during the ceremony with a microphone on the stage, I'm his toughest critic. He's got a tough, like a very loving family, very close-knit family. But his dad, who's also a football coach, has pushed him, right? And that's a good thing. And so there's toughness, there's athleticism, there's size, there's IQ. Again, all the boxes, I think, are being checked. There's still a lot more ways to go, because you're going to face guys in college that check those boxes on the defensive side of the ball too. But just as a starting point, I see why Charles is so high on him. And I kind of had a feeling, Wes, last summer when we saw Zion Giles, I was like, this is a guy that Charles Power is going to absolutely love, I think, because of all he brings to the table.
He might have been your favorite performer last summer, I feel like.
Yeah, I might have to go back and think, but he was kind of the guy.
He was definitely one of them.
Oh,
sure.
Yeah.
Easily.
He was
easily.
Yeah, he was easily in the top. Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, y'all. Hey, we're going to get out of here. Appreciate you hopping on with us and taking the time to join us. As always, appreciate those who hopped into the chat as well. Remember to like, review, subscribe, hit all the buttons on all the platforms. For Chris, I am Wes. And again, shout out to all of our great sponsors. Appreciate them for making the show possible. All right, y'all. That's it. Y'all have a good one, and we'll talk to you soon.